of the Cook Report.
This man is one of the most successful barristers in Britain. But he's willing to give advice on how to commit murder and get away with it.
And if I were going to do it, I would make sure I've got loads of alibis, I've got a quick getaway car, and I've got to get rid of all my clothes and all the weapons that I've used.
Balbir Singh, my name is Roger Cook from Central Television.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain to us why you as a barrister are prepared to advise people on the commission of a crime in advance of that crime?
I wouldn't do things like that.
I have to say you
look,
did.
Well, I want to look to the future within the profession, don't I? And I want to...
Well, from the sound of it, you haven't got one now.
Well, I'm sorry that that's the case, but I certainly would never try and assist anybody to do...
You were telling them how to get rid of evidence?
I wouldn't do things
Telling
like
them
that.
to use hired or stolen cars?
Oh, no.
Tonight, how lawyers look after their own and how the scales of justice are tilted in favour of the profession and against the public.
You can't trust the solicitor with your policies and whatever, your wills. Who can you trust?
We know that there are something like 20 or possibly even as much as 30,000 complaints against solicitors a year.
The Law Society and the Bureau simply want to sweep things under the carpet. They're simply there to protect solicitors.
Lawyers, at the end of the day, they're the biggest criminals I've ever met.
Britain's judges, wigged and gowned, the pinnacle of a legal system which is admired and copied throughout the world. But all is not well with the law. Complaints are on the increase against barristers who represent clients in the most serious court cases, and in particular against solicitors who instruct the barristers and who deal with a raft of other activities from house conveyancing to investment advice. So we decided to investigate. Within days of this advert appearing, we were contacted by dozens of people. One in particular gave grave cause for concern.
I heard the Balbir thing was advising on how to bend the law and how best to avoid detection. I'd heard this through my own community.
What we were being told, if true, was quite staggering. A barrister who was prepared to listen to plans for the commission of a particular crime and then would advise tailoring those plans to ensure maximum chances of success and minimum chances of getting caught. Our informant, who wants to remain anonymous, led us to this man, Balbir Singh. He has a high profile amongst the Sikh community in the Midlands, and his lifestyle is proof of the demand for his services in the Crown Courts of England. We invited our informant to work with us undercover to see how far Balbir Singh would go in bending the rules.
Oh, you come by yourself then?
Yes.
Oh, that's better. I feel more comfortable like this.
Okay.
Okay, but now how long will you be?
I'll be there within 10 or 15 minutes.
Right, well, in 10 minutes I shall make my way down.
Okay.
Thanks for coming. Bye-bye.
Almost immediately, Mr. Singh breaks one of the first rules of his profession.
Barristers must not discuss legal cases with the client without having a solicitor present.
But most complaints are about solicitors. In Blackpool, we met two grandmothers, Irene Shepherd and Irene Innes, who thought they could trust their solicitor with their financial investments. 2 years ago, the two Irenes won over £500,000 on the pools.
We decided we'd go on holiday to relax and we'd have a long talk about what we were going to do with the money. So we went to the Canary Isles for a week and we decided that we would invest the bulk of the money.
Solicitor James Bradbury had once employed Irene Innes as a cleaner. Now he was to take her to the cleaners.
James Bradbury, he asked me if I needed any help with investments, to come and see him and bring my friend along as well. So we had a talk about it and we thought, well, he's a nice fella So we went to see him and invested his money with him.
Within months, James Bradbury had left his house and vanished. Between them, the two Irenes had handed him about £50,000 to invest. He put his house up for sale and moved from hotel to hotel around the country, always one step ahead of his victims.
We wanted the money back and we didn't know where he was. Nobody admitted to knowing where he was, and we just didn't know what to do to start with.
Although the two Irenes were taken for a ride, they did get some of their money back, and their new solicitor is still fighting for the remaining £35,000.
My clients have suffered a lot of anxiety as a result of their dealings at the hands of Mr. Bradbury, but I'm confident that at the end of the day, the Solicitor's Indemnity Fund will pay them the amount that's due to them.
Which is more than you can say for Alan Taylor.
There you are.
He was once Bradbury's friend and sent him £15,000 after receiving a pleading letter.
He was my solicitor. I confided everything into his hands, and he just he's let me down, and of course, it's sullied my view of solicitors. That is for sure.
Bradbury told Alan Taylor that if anything happened to him, he'd get his money back from the Solicitor's Indemnity Fund. But they say he doesn't qualify because the £15,000 was a loan to a friend, not an investment.
It is difficult for me to come to terms with somebody who I held in such high esteem having done the dirty on me like he has. He knows that that £15,000 was important for my retirement. He knows that. He obviously doesn't give a damn.
We lured the elusive Mr. Bradbury to meet us. Mr. Bradbury, Roger Cook, Central Television. What have you done with the £35,000 you took from Irene Innes and Irene Shepherd? What have you done with the £15,000 you took from Alan Taylor? And where's the rest of your client's money?
You've got nothing to say, have you? What you've done is indefensible. You've broken the trust that the solicitor ought to enjoy. I certainly do. We have all the evidence we need.
Ahead of Bradbury is a disciplinary tribunal. And as he walks away, our informant prepares to meet Balbir Singh, the barrister.
We invented a story about a violent family and business feud. Our informant told Balbir Singh that he'd been involved with his uncle in the stabbing of his son-in-law. The son-in-law now wanted to press charges, and the informant's brothers wanted to stop him before he went to the police. We secretly filmed a meeting at a hotel, and the advice that Balbir Singh gave was later described by a leading QC as shocking and appalling.
See, what they may be thinking is we'll get him before he has a chance to press charges.
What are we going to do, kill him? That's the only alternative. We're going to shut him up forever.
If they go ahead, look, you and I both know how people get carried away. If they do go away and get carried away, what on earth are they going to do then? I mean, what?
You can't go halfway house then, can you? You can only bump somebody off then. Because if you go and beat him up, he's going to, if he was going to complain the first time or was still on the edge, he's certainly going to do it the second time, isn't he? And then it'll add credibility to his first one and say, right, they done me this time, and they actually did me last time, but I was too scared to mention it last time.
What would they do, though, if things get out of control? What are they going to say? What will the police do and all the rest of it?
They'll start locking everyone up, aren't they?
So how will they get away with it if they've done it? I mean, I am there...
The only way to get away with it is to make sure that you can't be recognised. Pay somebody else to do it.
Another professional rule broken.
A barrister must not encourage anyone to commit or commission a crime.
Ray Warren is one of the 50 solicitors who are struck off for dishonesty each year. When the Solicitors' Complaints Bureau went to his offices to investigate, they found he'd never submitted accounts. £167,000 was missing from his client's funds, yet he was allowed to continue to practice. 6 months later, he'd emptied the entire account of £700,000. Alwyn and Mandy Pritchard got a mortgage to buy their council house, but their solicitor, Ray Warren, kept the money and instead continued to pay their rent to the council.
How can you trust them? When it comes down to it, where do you go? If you can't trust the solicitor with your policies and whatever, your wills, who can you trust? I mean, if you left me, well, I wouldn't trust one again.
Warren's passion was the local football team he managed. He used some of the money to pay for a team coach and an executive minibus. He even pumped £80,000 into a nursing home his unsuspecting wife was running. After a great deal of stress and heartache, the Pritchards eventually got back the money to buy their council house from the Solicitor's Indemnity Fund. Ray Warren is currently serving 2.5 years in jail. Complaints about solicitors are investigated by the semi-independent Complaints Bureau funded by the Law Society. Now there are moves to remove any independence and bring the Bureau under the total control of the solicitors. Ola Hansen, a solicitor who monitors the legal profession, thinks this would be a step in the wrong direction. He wrote a critical report on the complaints procedure for the National Consumer Council.
The problem with the present system for policing the profession is that it's unfair to complainants. It's biased in favour of solicitors. It is run pretty incompetently, and it's not surprising that the public have no faith in it.
There are far fewer complaints about barristers. They even have their fans, although perhaps not the ones the barristers themselves would choose.
You have a lawyer to defend you, to get you out of it. I'm looking at it purely in a criminal way. I would bend all the rules to get out of it, and I'd expect him to do the same. Now, I can never tell him that I'm guilty or what I've done, but I mean, come on, he can read between the lines. Lawyers, at the end of the day, they're the biggest criminals I've ever met. They're worse than us.
Meanwhile, Balbir Singh, the barrister we've been secretly filming, is digging himself ever deeper into trouble.
Cover yourself. You don't leave no samples behind if you cut clothes or whatever. The minute you come back, they've all got to be burnt. Forensics is one has to be very careful with forensics.
Well, this is, you deal with it every day.
Oh, it's easy to cover it as well. I'm not saying it's not difficult, but it's easily covered as well.
Just by burning the clothes?
That's one of the main things, yeah, and getting rid of the weapons. Make sure they're never recovered.
And what would they do with those?
Again, same thing, burn them, bury them. Also, got to be careful about the vehicle that's used. Plates, and sometimes the interior of the vehicle has to go. Because if there's blood from the person transferred to the vehicle, then they'd find the blood from that person in the vehicle as well. So it's probably best to either use a stolen or borrowed vehicle. They've also got to have very good alibis. So that if somebody comes around and nicks them and says, let's say it happened yesterday at 7 o'clock at night, and they'll be asked where they were at 7 o'clock, they've got to be able to show where they were at 7 o'clock.
So what kind of alibis are good?
Being in a pub at that time where a number of people have seen them. Even family, being at home, we were watching this telly or something. But it's better to have some
independent witnesses.
Somebody independent. Somebody visiting the house, maybe, saying, we went round to visit that night, we were there 2 hours, and they were there with us all the time.
A barrister must not pervert the course of justice by advising a client to dispose of or fabricate evidence. A barrister cannot encourage a client to lie or to use a false alibi.
Another victim of an unscrupulous solicitor. He suffers from depression and doesn't want his family to know just how much he's lost.
Well, I hate to admit it, but the man has screwed me for nearly all my life savings and my inheritance, which is about £75,000. He does not seem to have cared or even thought about what he's doing to people's lives. I mean, he doesn't realise that this represents hard work of ordinary, simple people. And it's just totally demoralising, so I don't want to think about the man.
The man is Noel Horner. He used to operate from this office in Truro in Cornwall. Police estimate that £350,000 of clients' money, which passed through his hands for investment, has been lost. Horner originally promised the investors they would be paid back on demand. But the Law Society say investors might not receive compensation because Horner was operating outside the terms of his practice.
I think it's absolutely remiss of them that they didn't make it widely known that Mr. Horner was under investigation and that, you know, they were not protecting the general public. They weren't protecting their clients at all. I think I'm just appalled.
The majority of solicitors are diligent and trustworthy, and the Law Society says most complaints are about incompetence, rudeness and delay.
I think the profession as a whole, particularly on the high street, small firms, sole practitioners have had a pretty hard time. That doesn't excuse dishonesty, and much dishonesty, and of which there's relatively little in the profession, start with muddle. There are very few people who start off day one in practice out there to diddle their clients. In many cases, it's desperation.
But if clients are diddled, you've got two funds dealing with compensation, so you get accusations of buck passing and the not unnatural impression that the Law Society is simply protecting its own.
It certainly isn't in the business of protecting its own. It offers compensation up to £1 million per claim, a level of protection not offered by any other profession or financial institution. As far as buck passing is concerned, I reject that as well. Most cases are dealt with simply by one fund, but because of the way that the law is laid down, there are some cases where we have to work with our own indemnity insurers, and they also offer £1 million cover as well.
But businessman Don Bell is campaigning for a fully independent complaints bureau. He says statistics are hard to get.
The Complaints Bureau are very careful not to issue figures, but we know that there are something like 20 or possibly even as much as 30,000 complaints against solicitors a year. And that is something like 1/3 of the practicing solicitors in the United Kingdom. They give a great wealth of statistics. We have heard, but we can't substantiate, that it's something like 1.5 to 2% of complaints may actually have an end result which is favourable to the complainant.
Mr. Horner, Roger.
We caught up with Noel Horner in a Truro car park.
I'd like to ask you what you've done with the £350,000 you took from a number of your Welsh clients.
I'm not prepared to talk to you, Mr. Cook.
Why not? You took money under false pretences. You broke trust of a solicitor.
I have not taken money from anywhere.
You have taken money from people.
Under false pretences, Mr. Cook.
You have taken money that you said you'd pay back. There's a photograph of your letter saying you would repay.
I'm not prepared to talk to you, Mr. Cook.
And there is your attempted repayment
Mr. Cook.
on a cheque with a defunct building
Mr.
society.
Cook.
Is this any way for a solicitor to behave? I mean, people trust them, don't they? Shouldn't have trusted you, should they?
I think they were quite right to trust me, Mr. Cook.
Do you?
I looked after my clients very well for very many years,
Did
Mr.
you?
Cook. Yes, I did.
This is your signature, isn't it? You did promise to pay back.
It's not my signature, Mr. Cook.
Oh, it isn't your signature? Well, the police think it is.
That's not my signature.
It isn't.
Well, the police haven't told me that yet, Mr. Cook.
You never promised to pay anything back.
I didn't say that. I said that was not my signature.
I see. Is this your letter and your letterhead?
It looks like my letterhead,
Yes,
Mr.
your
Cook.
letterhead.
Looks like my letterhead.
And you wrote that letter? Promising to pay back,
I don't know if
Mr.
I wrote
Mitchley.
that letter or not. It's my letterhead. It's not my signature.
You would argue black's white, wouldn't you?
Mr. Cook, I watch you do that on your lovely programme every week. Goodbye, Mr. Cook.
Sorry about the mess.
Once again, we meet Balbir Singh. This time, he does at least have a solicitor present. But although the solicitor cautions against the planned attack, Balbir Singh once again rehearses the arguments for a secure alibi and getting rid of the evidence.
If you do him now, the first people who are looking for is you.
Well, this is what when you said last time, make alibis. I don't. If we make reasonable alibis, as you said, independent, They were okay. Aren't
Even so, why get into that just yet?
You don't need to. You want to take it in stages.
Well, 6 months down the road, if they won't leave it, and if I were going to do it, then I would make sure I've got loads of alibis, I've got a quick getaway car, and I've got to get rid of all my clothes and all the weapons that I've used. I don't think, you know, that doesn't take a great deal of working out, does it?
A barrister must at all times be totally honest. He must never deliberately mislead anyone, whether a judge, fellow lawyer, client, or witness.
Balbir Singh. We confronted Balbir Singh with our evidence.
Yeah.
Would you like to explain to us why you as a barrister are prepared to advise people on the commission of a crime in advance of that crime?
How do you mean?
Well, we had, for example, somebody working for us coming to see you, and you advised him how to get rid of the evidence on the stabbing.
How do you mean, get rid of the evidence? I advised...
We have you on film doing it.
All
You
right,
also advised, and this seems to be very much against what any barrister should do, in a family and business matter, that the way to solve the problem might be to murder one of the participants.
I most certainly did not.
You did?
I did not.
You can't go halfway house then, can you? You can only bump somebody off there.
There was a stabbing involved, and you advised as to how to get rid of the evidence.
I wouldn't advise somebody how to get rid of the evidence.
How to lie their way out of it.
Oh, no, most certainly not. You see, you can't lie your way out of trouble.
And they've also got to have very good alibis.
You also saw this man directly, and a barrister shouldn't do that. A barrister should take instructions through a solicitor.
You should take instructions, but you will understand that people do approach individuals directly, and within the code of conduct you are allowed to see people, for example, a family, social context, that sort of thing, and inevitably, you see, you know people, as you probably know people, and you'll pop along and say, listen, you know, something's happened, you know, can you give me any ideas what to do? And most times I'll say to them, pop along to a solicitor, or this is what, you know, just off-the-cuff advice.
But this is minor compared to what you did. And what you did was transcribed and taken to a leading silk.
Yeah.
He said that what you did was disgraceful, staggering, and was at the very least an offence which would have you disbarred immediately.
Well, I'm sorry that they've seen it that way, but I would never conduct myself in that way. You see, it is unfortunate for me because, okay, you get to know a lot of people and people pop along all the time and want to have a chat and things like that, and you'll try and help people out. But I wouldn't do things like that.
I have to say you did.
Well, I want to look to the future within the profession, don't I? And I want to...
Well, from the sound of it, you haven't got one now.
Well, I'm sorry that that's the case, but I certainly would never try and... assist anybody to do...
You were telling them how to get rid of evidence?
I wouldn't do things
Telling
like
them
that.
to use hired or stolen cars?
Oh, no. If somebody's setting me up, that's different. But I wouldn't do things like that.
Now, you volunteered this information to somebody who was, to an extent you were set up, having heard that this was the sort of thing you would do.
No.
We sent somebody in to see whether it was true, and it was.
Yeah, I wouldn't do things like that,
You
Mr.
did.
Cook.
Monday, then. Also, got to be careful about the vehicle.
Well, I wouldn't do things like that. Otherwise, I wouldn't be standing here talking to you, would I?
Well, barristers are very good at talking.
No,
That's what they get paid for.
I don't think I'm very good at talking. I just try and do a job, I'm afraid.
Well, you did the wrong job this time, and the film evidence proves it.
I'm sorry, but I don't accept that.
But we'll just have to wait and see, won't we?
All right, thank you. Thank you for letting me have myself.
Shortly after that meeting, Balbir Singh demanded a proper sit-down interview, but when the time came, he didn't turn up for it. What we got instead was facts after facts, protesting his innocence and making a claim he'd never made before, that he in fact was setting us up in order to gain information to pass on to the police, something he hasn't done either. At the end of the day, we got a letter from the Bar Council. He'd reported himself to them. Perhaps the most sensible thing he could have done, because if he hadn't, we would have. The Bar Council has now asked for, and will get, all our evidence. Albania.